First, I will tell you the story you would have heard in your American media news. Then I will tell you the story as I know it, how my congregation knows it, and how all of our news media in Turkey reported it. One morning in November of 2003, a neighborhood police officer sat in the shop across the street, sipping his tea. And he noticed an argument break out between some people standing next to a bus parked in the street. He went out to investigate. What ensued was that militant Islamic terrorists drove the bus, which turned out to be filled with explosives, right through those double doors. It was headed to our sanctuary. And he pointed to this beautifully ornate, decorated sanctuary behind him that the door was open. And he continued, over 200 of our congregants were gathered for worship. Fortunately, that bus did not make it into the sanctuary. And sadly, unfortunately, it did make it through the doors and exploded in the entryway where we were standing. And he continued, what was reported in American news media about this attack was that Muslim terrorists attacked our synagogue, attempting to kill as many Jews as they could. What actually happened was that the local shopkeepers, the neighbors, the police officer, and our 6 security guards figured out what was about to happen. And they struggled with the terrorists to stop the attack. When the bus drove in through those front doors and exploded in our foyer, 42 people were killed. Not one was a Jewish person. Not one. All who died were Muslim. They each gave their life to protect the 200 Jewish people who were praying in the sanctuary. The rabbi continued, this is how my country's media news covered this tragedy, and he brought our attention again to the wall where the clock stood, time frozen, in this beautiful encased picture frame with these newspaper headlines all posted there for all of us to see. And each headline read, in some variation of words, but the same message, Holy Temple attacked. One of our temples bombed. After the rabbi read each of the front page headlines to us, one by one, he turned and he said, see, in your country, you would only hear and know the story of Muslims attacking Jews. But in my country, we know the truth, that one of our holy temples was attacked. And those who saved us were our brothers and sisters who are Muslim. And they gave their lives so that we may live. In my country, our churches, our synagogues, and our mosques are all our country's holy temples. And this attack was experienced by the people of Turkey as an attack upon all of us. Our entrances can be openings, revealing the pain and shining truth. The third story stems from a popular and infamous 19th century nationalist-style painting that hangs in the vestibule or entry of numerous Unitarian Universalist congregations across the country. It symbolizes our foundational values as a liberal religious faith, religious tolerance. I think offering a sign of religious tolerance is a good-intentioned message to share with those who enter our place of worship. But this particular painting is of the 16th century Transylvanian Unitarian John Sigismund. His court, the representatives from the different traditions, and the nobility of all listening intently to the court's preacher, Francis David, while he argues for toleration. And while he speaks, his arms are outstretched like this. A single ray of sun, it shines directly on David's head. And the clear implication is that God is directly planting the principle of toleration into David's brain. Reverend Dr. Susan Ritchie, whose scholarship is Unitarian history in relationship to Judaism and to Islam, refers to this painting as the Immaculate Conception theory of our Unitarian Declaration of Tolerance. Ritchie's infamous 2009 Men's Lecture series sheds light on the historical and cultural enmeshments and encounters of the actual lived lives of Transylvanian Unitarians, Muslims, and Jews. Her lectures are soon to be released in a book form, and I've had the good fortune to have Reverend Dr. Ritchie not only as a professor for many classes, but also as my academic advisor and my mentor. Until recently, Unitarian Universalists have been taught that our forebearer, the brilliant Transylvanian Unitarian court preacher Francis David, is the person responsible for our Unitarians' Declaration of Tolerance, then called the Edict of Torda. These values now are expressed in our Unitarian Universalist 7 principles. King John Sigismund is considered to be a founding father of the Unitarian movement. He's considered responsible for the Edict of Torda and starting many Unitarian churches. It is only fairly recently that we have embraced within our liberal faith movement the fact that the Kingdom of Transylvania was completely within the Ottoman Islamic Empire at that time. Ritchie's recent historical research shows that the basis for the Edict of Torda for granting religious toleration was established not only in Francis David's mind and under Transylvanian King John Sigismund, not only in the European humanist influence, not even only through the direct political and legal influence of the Ottoman Empire, but in the everyday lives of actual persons who were already living in multi-religious and multicultural ways. It was the actual lived hyphen that could be found in the intermingling and interactions of vastly different people living together in one community, making friends, making families, and community from different cultures and different religions. In Transylvania, similar edicts had been issued through the Ottoman Islamic judicial system in dealing with civil engagement over issues of religious tolerance. In fact, as early as 20 years prior to our infamous Edict of Torda, when King John Sigismund was only 8 years old, we have evidence of an edict almost verbatim as our infamous Edict of Torda. John Sigismund's father, the king, had died when he was only 2 weeks old. And upon his mother's, Queen Isabella's, direct request, Sultan Suleiman of the Ottoman Islamic Empire ruled John's kingdom until he was of age to reign. It does not take too much of a leap of imagination to realize how enmeshed and influenced our forebear, King Sigismund, was in living under Islamic rule, all the while growing up, particularly as this was a time of significant cultural and religious exchanges and intermingling. King John Sigismund grew up steeped in a pluralistic and tolerant society under the Ottoman Islamic rule and influence. I am grateful to be part of this liberal religious tradition and this movement because we are a living faith tradition, which means that as we receive scholarly and newly researched historical evidence contrary to what we think we have known, we uncover truth. And we create more openings to live out our values embedded in our principles. We look for the openings. The world's religions and cultures have been more greatly enmeshed in patterns of creative conflict, mutual attraction, and circular lived patterns of influence than what historical scholarship has fully imagined. There are, of course, many pieces of many portraits yet to be assembled. But when we assemble them, I feel heartened in our living liberal religious tradition that through our allegiance to our shared values expressed in our principles, that we will keep an eye not towards telling ethnically and religiously distinct cultural histories, but with an eye to the many ways in which the borders between cultures have been crossed, shared, renegotiated, and recrossed. And in the case of early European Unitarians, by those who deliberately chose multicultural and multi-religious lived experience as their larger path. Our goal remains to be open, to be a portal, to become, without growing obsessive, gradually more inclusive to the hyphen, to be an activist, paying sincere attention to who might be left out in the hymnals, in our reading selections, our board circles, our social action efforts, in all of the sundry rituals of congregational life. Our goal is to be pioneers. Healthy congregations discover new ways to be genuinely expansive, realizing that people are fallible, and our churches will inevitably keep missing the point. Right? It's human nature. But as long as we stay open and we pay attention to the signs we post for all who enter our house of worship, place no restrictions on others to cover their hyphenated self-identities, and as long as we're willing to uncover deeper and deeper levels of truth, particularly when it comes to our lived interconnections as people, we are poised to be a very viable 21st century liberal religious faith movement. And I am so proud to be a Unitarian Universalist. The part I like the most is the hyphen.